All right, so I've got my stylistic reference, I've got my photo reference, and I've set it up. My paintable space is 11 by 14 by 350 pixels per inch with my sidebars. I'm at 16 inches wide, 14 inches tall, but this will be the thing I crop down to at the end. And this is my shape speed paint layer. And so what I'm going to do is try, like I show here, to, at 100% opacity, just scumble in, is the painting term, the shape and form of what I want. And I'm not actually sure what that is yet. So it's going to be largely exploratory. So this is my primary reference, right? And then I have some others. But now I have places I can steal colors from and get ideas for shape language from. So what brushes am I going to use? Well, to begin with, I'm just going to use a regular pressure-sensitive brush. And I can make it either soft or hard-edged, right? I started with soft-edged. It's hurting my eyes a little bit, so I'll go to a harder, and maybe I'll just take that down to about 90. And I'm using a tablet, so it's pressure-sensitive, so I can make that brush pretty darn large. And then when I want smaller strokes, right, I can just not press as hard. I'll soften it just a little. So now, let me hold down Option, and then I steal. I'll soften it a little bit more. So I'm right at 50%, right? And I'm just going to scrub it in. Now notice what looks really bright can actually be pretty dark when you're seeing it on white. That's why it's really helpful to have this middle gray background. Even like the brightest shapes in here are not super bright when you're looking at pure white. But I still like to use white as the background as I start. And then I can always kind of steal some of these weird colors too for my stylistic references. Now I know I want this big bulbous red nose. And the William de Koonings give me a lot of kind of pinks and browns, shadow tones I can use for that. I know I want these big white eyes. So this was the AI generated reference. That can be helpful. Then I know I want kind of the messy hair. So this is the kind of painting where I have no sketch underneath. So I'm just trying to demo that for you. Though a lot of you won't choose to go that way because you have to be pretty brave. But it is fun. And it definitely makes it very different than digital coloring where you're working behind outlines all the time. I can already tell it's going to be a fun project. And then sometimes your photo reference will give you really interesting lighting. I used my kind of inversion portrait there to mess with the lighting a little bit and some saturated colors. So just experiment. All right, so I kind of know where the eyes are going to be, right? See, I don't think I want to do a smile. I think I want to do this kind of big seamed Muppet mouth. And I'm being pretty sloppy intentionally. And I'm not worried about the glasses at all. Not until later. And then how can I do the hair? Well, I like this kind of scribble method. But I'm at 100%, so every time I do it, it's going to obliterate the pixels around it. Now I'm also, by only holding down Option to steal my color, I am never using pure white, and I am never using pure black, right? Which is just a good tip in painting in general. And you'll see even when it looks like I'm clicking on black, there's color to it. These are what are called chromatic grays. And that's very helpful. Okay, then what am I going to do with eyebrows? I kind of like this expression. A soft, vulnerable puppet. All right, and then I want to do from the shoulders up. I just don't want a floating head. So you do have to pay attention to the rest of it as well. I'm going to put myself in a collared shirt. That's often what I wear. But I'll have some fun with it. Or maybe the sweater. Yeah, sweater's more Muppety. With a collared shirt underneath. I don't need to worry about shoulder proportions because I'm a puppet. And if you would like more guidance from my tutorials on kind of matching realistic proportions for portraits and faces, you can just look at past YouTube videos. Where I'll share things like the face template that the ancient Romans used for portraiture and how that builds. All right, so this is the shaped speed painting kind of way of setting it up. And that happened fast. That happened in about 5 minutes. Right? And the important thing is that it's mostly all filled in. So even where you want lights, you see how that's filled in. Where it's not is here, and I need to go ahead and fill that in. And I'm just using a basic brush. Okay. Now, what would be the next step in my speed painting here? Saving it. The next step is refining it. So that's your base paint layer. The details, you're going to start chiseling out from those shapes. And you're going to do that on a layer on top. And you're going to do that with a lower opacity brush, because that will mix whatever new paint you put on with the paints underneath. But I want to also show you this sketched method. So now that I've explored and I kind of know what I'm going for, I'm going to do this. I'm going to, and I do recommend locking all the layers you don't want to paint on. I'm going to take an onion skin, pretty dramatically that speed shaped painting, lock it, and now I'm going to just do a sketch. Now there are multiple ways I could do this. Rotoscoping would be to unlock my references, to grab one of them, turn auto select on, duplicate it, move it out, stretch it, doesn't matter if it's low resolution. Right, make it big, onion skin it, and then use that to sketch on. So I'm going to call this rotoscoped sketch. Now rotoscoping is when, before digital effects, photos would be manipulated by directly painting on the film. That's how like the early lightsabers were done. And other kind of animations. And so now I'm going to sketch with a fairly neutral color. I'll pick something like this. And what I want to do is just find, I have a really big brush still, but I'm just sketching, blocking out the big shapes, just getting the kind of proportions. So where the eyes are, where the bottom of the nose is, where the lips are, where the chin is, where the ear is. Now, if I was trying to do a portrait that was more representational, like the one I showed you of James Joyce, this would be a good way to kind of frame in the proportions. My eyebrows are lower in reality than my Muppet self. Right? So and then my collar, thickness of my neck, all of that, right? So this, let me turn off the references, right? That can get me started for sketching. And then I would just onion skin that and then start painting on top of that. That's a rotoscope sketch. Doesn't look very Muppety though, right? So what can I do? Well, I can take that rotoscope sketch. I'll make a duplicate just so you can see the difference at the end. And then I transform it, and I'm going to use what I know about manipulating pixels. And I'm going to play with the proportions, which is exactly what caricature artists do, right? So if I wanted to exaggerate my forehead, my proportions might look like that. If I want to exaggerate my chin, my proportions might look like this. Right? I can make myself pear-shaped. I can make myself light bulb-shaped. I can make my head more spherical. Right? I could turn myself into a Funko Pop, kind of a rounded square, using the rotoscoped reference. But what I think is less interesting creatively, though we're just trying to learn the basic skills, so this would be kind of the Funko Pop version of my head. What we are doing is just learning how to build our own pixels. So what I recommend is you just play with it a little bit to something that looks more interesting to you. Whether you're doing a celebrity, whether you're doing yourself, whether you're doing a friend. So even if I was going for reality, those proportions look a little bit more interesting to me than these ones. Because remember, any photo will distort the shapes based on its point of view and based on the curve of the particular lens and whether it's zoomed in or zoomed out, right? There's distortion effects that happen. So you get to decide before you start painting how they look. And I like this more than this. So then I would start building my base layer on top of that sketch. Now for the Muppet version, so what I'll do is I'll take that rotoscope sketch and I'll move it down to kind of line up with the Muppet version. And actually it lines up pretty well. So my eyes are there, right? My nose ends where my nose ends. And then my mouth is a little bit higher, but the shadow underneath my lip I'll put in a similar place. And my chin even finishes the same place. My ear finishes the same place. What I'm noticing is that from my original shape painting, I just made the hair too small. So what do I mean? I observed everything else pretty correctly, but I didn't go far enough back on the hair. So I think I can go a little crazier with the hair, which would be great. So I'm going to go back to that speed painting, and I'm just going to put in more of this hair shape. I'm going to make it a little bit more lopsided, a little messier. And this is still painting at 100%, just getting rid of whites in the shapes I want. Okay, so you can decide how you want to start it, but the next phase of the second stage of sketching is the first stage of shape painting, right? Filling everything in with solid color. So let me show you just another way of sketching. So that's my rotoscope sketch. And I'll lock these. Turn them off. Here is another way of sketching. Start at a fairly low opacity brush. And I'll keep it pretty big. Well, no, I'll make it a little bit smaller. And then I'm just going to kind of find my way. Okay, I want something kind of like this. I want the eyes to be here, maybe big and round. You know, really sketchy, big nose.